The last silence. Have you ever wondered what the heartbeat of the earth might sound like if we could truly hear it? Maybe slow, maybe broken, maybe just a little sorrowful. This story begins at the edge of silence, not with creation, but with destruction. Roughly 250 million years ago, Earth endured its deepest wound, a cataclysm known as the Great Dying. It wasn't just an extinction, it was a near erasure of life itself. 90% of all marine creatures, 70% of land species gone, like someone had closed the final chapter of life's oldest book. And in the silence that followed, there was nothing. No wind, no rustling of leaves, no shadows moving across still lakes, only grief and ash. The earth stood quiet, like a mother who had lost all her children. But time, it never stops. It doesn't cry. It simply moves forward. And when the last tear dried, the soil quietly breathed again. Beneath the blackened ground, something stirred. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper. A seed buried in ashes. A heartbeat, faint but defiant. A creature tiny, forgotten by history, had just opened its eyes. Earth felt it. It didn't recognize it, but it sensed a pulse. This wasn't power. This wasn't fear. It was something softer, a desire to live. And so began a new journey, not with thunder, not with fire, but with a quiet unfolding. The surface of the planet was still burnt. The air smelled of sulfur and sorrow. Trees were now only shadows on the ground. Rivers had turned to steam. But somewhere deep inside, the earth began to change again. Its molten core pulsed slightly warmer. Its skin, cracked and wounded, was preparing to be reborn from the ashes. Not just survival, but something more daring. A dream, Earth's new dream. And in that dream, life would rise again, not as it was before, but in a form the world had never seen. Earth's forgotten children. It started with the smallest of things, not giants, not monsters, but creatures who slipped between shadows. Small, reptilian forms that clung to life like whispers in the wind. They didn't roar, they didn't rule, they survived. And survival was a kind of quiet magic. The earth, once grieving, now watched in wonder as moss returned to the rocks, as ferns unfurled under grey skies, as insects buzzed in the silence, writing new music on broken wind. The oceans, still mourning, began to shimmer again. Tiny plankton shimmered like stardust in dark waters, pulling oxygen from light, inventing breath where there was none. And on land, the first forests crept back into being. Cycads, ginkgos, ancient trees with roots deeper than memory. They held hands underground, slowly stitching the earth back together. And among their roots, new life was learning how to walk. A creature, no bigger than a house cat, curled its claws around warm bark, its body low, its eyes wide. It sniffed the air, thick with steam, alive with mystery. It didn't know what it was, but it knew one thing. It had survived, and somewhere in its blood, something ancient stirred. These were the ancestors, not of mammals, but of something the world hadn't yet dreamed of. Dinosaurs? No, not yet. These were the forgotten children, prototypes, sketches. Some would vanish in time's river. Others would give birth to thunder. The earth was still dangerous. Volcanoes still whispered in the distance. Meteorites still prowled the sky. Predators lurked in shadows. But something was shifting, not in the earth, and time itself. For the first time in millions of years, time felt curious. It leaned closer to Earth's surface, watching with quiet breath, wondering what would come next. And what came was a miracle of scale. From the bones of survivors, evolution painted something bold. Bigger lungs, stronger legs, eyes that could see farther, necks that stretched to taste the treetops. Not all at once, not overnight, but slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat returning to a long-lost drum. And then, in the great silence of a golden dusk, a shadow moved, longer than a bus, stronger than a storm. It stepped into the forest, and the world held its breath. The age of giants was beginning to dream itself into form. The breath of giants. The winds changed. They weren't cold anymore. They weren't carrying ash. They were full of breath and promise. The earth had spent millions of years healing. Now it was ready to imagine again. And what it imagined was size, grace, power wrapped in silence. The first true dinosaurs didn't arrive with thunder. They arrived with caution. Barely taller than a child, with slender limbs and curious eyes. They stepped softly across the moss-covered forest floors, leaving behind footprints no wider than a hand. They were not kings, they were explorers, but the earth watched them and smiled. These were no longer just survivors. These were sculptors of fate. In their blood ran the memory of fire and the dream of flight. Some of them would stay low, hunters in the ferns, moving in packs, eyes gleaming under moonlight. Others would rise slowly, majestically, necks growing longer, bodies stretching like rivers of muscle and bone. They fed not on flesh, but on the sun-soaked leaves of ancient trees. Each bite, a prayer, each step, a rhythm, and in their lungs, a new kind of breath, flowing in one direction, like a song without end. That breath was the beginning of thunder. They weren't called giants yet, but the ground had started to feel them. Time had begun keeping their footsteps, and above them, the skies changed too. The clouds grew thinner, the blue deepened, oxygen rose. It was as if the earth herself had taken a deeper breath, preparing to carry these beings into an age of marvels. The world was still dangerous. Lakes boiled with heat. Storms tore open forests. Predators with knife-like teeth still prowled, but even they couldn't stop what had begun, because now the dinosaurs were no longer just reacting to the world. They were reshaping it. Mountains echoed with their movement. Forests bent to their hunger, and in the silence between storms, you could hear it, a slow, steady rhythm building. Boom, boom. It wasn't a heartbeat. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of the earth learning how to walk with giants. The age when the earth sang. There comes a moment in every story when silence is no longer enough. The earth had watched, it had waited, it had healed. Now it sang, and that song, it echoed through every canyon, every forest, every sky. This was the age of the giants, and they did not whisper, they thundered. Across ancient plains, herds of massive creatures moved as one, legs like tree trunks, tails sweeping dust into the air like smoke. They weren't monsters, they were monuments, moving memories of a planet that had chosen to dream bigger than ever before. The sauropods stretched their necks into the clouds, grazing from treetops like gods feeding on sunlight. The ground shook beneath their weight, but it did not break, because the earth had made room for them. Their bones weren't heavy. They were hollow, like bird bones, light enough to lift, strong enough to last forever. And they did last. For millions of years, they ruled. Not through war, but through presence. They didn't need claws. They didn't need teeth like blades. Their power was stillness. Their strength was being seen. But not all dinosaurs walked with calm. In the shadows of giants, others evolved differently. They grew faster, leaner, sharper. Predators with minds like fire, planning, stalking, learning. Their eyes locked onto movement, their claws curled with instinct. These weren't just hunters, they were thinkers, and the world had never seen minds like theirs. One of them looked up at the sky one day and didn't see clouds. It saw possibility, because above the earth, another dream had begun. Feathers, small at first, simple, not for flight, but for warmth. But the wind noticed. It caught those feathers, lifted them, and suddenly the age of the sky began. Feathers grew longer, arms became wings. Dinosaur hearts beat faster, muscles lighter, eyes sharper. They ran, they leapt, and for the first time since the oceans boiled, a creature born of earth touched the sky. Not a bird, not yet, just the idea of one. But ideas are dangerous things, especially when they fly. The fire that spared a feather. Every story has an ending, but this one ends with a question, because sometimes, when the world ends, something small survives. For 160 million years, dinosaurs ruled. They became mountains that moved, storms that breathed, and shadows that learned to fly. But even giants cannot stop the sky from falling. One morning, there was no morning. A fireball the size of a city fell from the heavens, and the earth forgot how to breathe. It struck with the power of 10 billion bombs. Oceans rose, skies burned, forests vanished in a blink, and the giants, their thunder turned to silence. Dust filled the air, choking out the sun for years. Without light, plants died. Without plants, the gentle giants starved. Predators turned desperate. They hunted shadows. They hunted each other. But hunger always wins. And yet, in the ashes, beneath the silence, something moved. It was not big. It was not strong. It did not roar. It chirped. A creature no taller than your hand, covered in feathers, beating a heart small but furious. It had survived, not with teeth, not with strength, but with warmth, with wings, with wonder. It looked at the empty sky and remembered flight. The dinosaurs did not all die. Some became birds. They sing now, every morning. They carry the memory of thunder in their hollow bones. So when you hear a bird call, remember, it is not just a song. It is a story of fire, of feathers, of the earth dreaming something into the sky that never fell back down.